This is Nuts and Bolts. I'm Lon Schiffbauer. So when you walk into a bookstore these days, if you in fact do walk into a bookstore, you'll find any number of books on productivity and accomplishing goals. And, well, hell, I've written one myself. Thing is, there's a difference between reading a book and integrating the principles into our daily lives. Well, my guest today has really nailed down that integration idea. He has successfully taken a lot of very powerful concepts from the various books that he's read, and he has read hundreds of them, and integrated them into his daily behavior. And as a result, he's really accomplishing some awesome goals. So with that, let me introduce you to Andreas. Hey, so how's it going?
Amazing. No complaints over here. Yeah.
Best answer possible, right?
Yeah, it's the first thing that came to mind. Feeling amazing. I'm on a podcast. This is pretty cool.
Well, I really appreciate this. So why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself to everyone?
Okay. Hello, everyone on the podcast. My name is Andres Dominguez III. I met Lon at my time at Salt Lake Community College. He was definitely one of my favorite professors during my time there. And he was one of the few professors that actually invited us to reach out and connect with him via social media. And we've stayed in touch over the years. And just recently, he reached out to me to be on his podcast. And it was definitely a privilege and an honor to be on this podcast. I'm currently a senior at the University of Utah studying marketing there. And then by night, I do a little bit of content creation. So that involves photography, videography, planning out content, things of that nature.
Folks, so that you know, when he says he does a little bit of content creation, he's being kind of modest there. So I invited you onto this podcast because you seem to really have dialed in a process when it comes to setting and reaching goals. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing in the social media arena in that sphere, especially when it comes to your content creation and so forth.
So as far as that, and this kind of goes with like my whole philosophy of goal setting, because in the past I've tried to like set goals for like X amount of whatever, or like I try to set a really like quantifiable goal, which is important. But now I'm kind of approaching it more as like a system and more of like, okay, who do I want to become in the process? So right now I'm working on social media to really build a platform, build an audience. And right now, the way I see it is I'm just practicing my skills of learning how to work with an audience, how to communicate with an audience effectively, and eventually how to use that audience as a platform for bigger and greater things that I would like to accomplish with my life.
Well, I'd like to break that down into a couple of things. So the first part is you said, okay, yes, I'm setting quantifiable goals. There are actual goals out there that I can wrap my head around numerically. But you said what I'm really kind of focusing is on right now is a system, which from a goal setting standpoint is like mwah, perfect because people don't reach goals, systems reach goals, right? It's when we
That's
follow a system and we create habits. And at a certain point, it almost becomes inevitable that we succeed because it's a habit.
So one of the things that I realized early on when I was like, okay, I really want to be big with content creation is I realized that all the biggest content creators, they're making stuff every single day, both on the go, and they're also working on like their bigger projects that are going to be released in months or years. So I figured, well, I'm going to have to start making content every single day if I want to be anything like them in the future, anything like the people I look up to. So I started asking myself, okay, what's something that I know that I do every single day that I can just incorporate some content creation into? So for me, that's like the gym. I don't skip the gym hardly ever. I go 5 to 6 times a week, and I figured, okay, maybe I can do a little bit of vlogging, and I'll make sure that whenever I'm at the gym, I bust out my phone, I bust out my gimbal, and I record myself doing a couple lifts. And that way I kind of stack those habits of a habit that I already have deeply ingrained in my routine, which is going to the gym. So I know that if I go to the gym, I'm going to get at least a little bit of content for my daily vlog. Once I get that ball rolling of getting some content from, or, recording my clips at the gym, I'm like, oh, I already have quite a bit of content. Let me just get a little bit more. I'll do some while I'm at the grocery store or whatever. I'll just throw more things in. And that's kind of been like a really good system for me, is that, okay, if I can just throw in this extra habit I'm trying to build, if I can like stack that with something else that I'm already doing that I already know is going to happen, it kind of like assumes, it's just kind of like assumed that it's going to happen. And that's been one way to really make my vlogs kind of like a part of my daily routine, is by just stacking a little bit extra into my daily workout.
Now, tell me a little bit about stacking habits. What do you mean by stacking your habits?
So I can't take credit for that term, habit stacking. First I ever heard of habit stacking was from a book called Atomic Habits. Pretty sure that's James Clear. I read that in the summer of 2019, and I was actually going through a really rough time. I had just gotten out of a really, really bad relationship. And one of my best friends, Jake, he sent me this book. I don't think he really knew what was going on in my life, but he sent it to me just because that's kind of what we do. We just send each other books and stuff. And I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, this book is like life changing. And in that book, James talks about habit stacking, how if you're trying to build your habits or implement new habits or new routines that aren't yet like fully ingrained into your lifestyle, the best way to ensure you do them is by stacking your habits. Like if there's something that is already assumed that's going to happen, or something that you're already really, really like programmed to do daily, if you just stack the new habit right before it or right after it or somewhere in there where you know it's already going to happen, it just increases the probability of you actually doing it, because you're already stacking it or just kind of like piggybacking it onto something that's already going to happen. So that's been like a major cheat code for me to do my daily vlogs is just stacking it with my daily gym routine.
And I bet it really helps in the time management because, setting aside a separate time for each individual task would take far more hours out of the day than if you kind of stack them together.
Exactly, exactly. And that's a kind of like I'm going to go off of what you just said as far as like doing a little bit throughout the day. I kind of took the same philosophy of like, it's not doing everything all in one big chunk. Rather, it's just splitting it up into little bite-sized pieces throughout your days, weeks, and months. And those are the things that really build up into the most impactful things in your life. The small, consistent things you do, there are seemingly small things that you do every day. Those build up into the really big things in days, weeks, and months, and eventually years.
Why content creation? Why do you feel like this is something you want to do? Be an influencer?
So I think there's a lot of things. Lately, a question I've been asking myself lately is, what is my gift and how can I best share it? And I'm still figuring that out, but I feel like in the new like digital age that we're in now, if you're not making content, you're basically like non-existent, like in the terms of the internet. So I'm like, okay, if I want to share my gift, it's going to be on the internet. And how do I share my gift on the internet? It's with content. So I'm like, okay, even if I don't know exactly what it is that I want my message to be yet, I can at least get the practice now. And I know that along the way, I'll figure it out. I know that along the way, I'll have that aha moment. And that aha moment will only come if I'm doing all the right things that lead up to that aha moment. If I had to give you a more concrete answer, I'd say my energy is my gift. I've had people like tell me when you walk into a room, you have this energy, you bring your vibe, all these things. And I feel like that's true. I can feel when I can like bring people up that are around me. And that for me is probably the most gratifying thing, is when I can take someone and make them feel better about themselves or make them feel more confident in themselves. So if I can build upon those little things that I like, that I enjoy, that I feel like I'm good at, if I can just build on those and get better and better at those and share it at scale, then I feel like I would be living in my purpose.
Living in your purpose. That's a tremendous aspirational vision. I want to validate something you're saying in the broad sense for a moment. So, of course, my students predominantly are 18, 19, 22, 23, average age is 22, right? And this generation is often referred to as digital natives. From the moment they were born, they've had a digital device in their hand, and the whole world is in that device. And so they're very comfortable with the device. They trust it. It's just in time information. They get all their entertainment from it. They get all their guidance and their friendship and their validation through it. But there's something profoundly missing. I very often will ask my students, who's on TikTok? Who's on Instagram? Who
Everyone's hands
watches
go up.
YouTube? And everybody says, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I watch these things all the time, right? I go, okay. Now, who here creates content in these
Mm.
channels? And it's crickets, man. And I am shocked every single time. My old man head just kind of assumes that this generation is all out there creating content, but they're not. They're consumers. And so, even in this incredible age of the democratization of our gift to the world, we're still just consumers. We're not sharing. We're not out there publishing. We're not out there influencing. We're still sheep saying, who should I listen to? Who should I be mad at? Who should I laugh at? And it's like, you need to be a part of that conversation. So I really appreciate that you're part of that conversation, which leads me to my next question. Has anybody ever said, so Andreas, come on, when are you going to get a real job? What do you really want to do with your life? Has anybody just kind of said, influencer, grow up?
You know what? I've been fortunate enough to that I haven't had anyone say that to my face. However, I'm sure people think it. A self-limiting belief that sometimes will pop up that I have to tackle sometimes is I'll start thinking of like what people think of when I'm posting my stuff or when I'm engaging with people on Instagram. And I'm like, oh my gosh, people are going to think like, why are you just playing around on Instagram? Why don't you like focus on your work or focus on your school or go do something productive instead of just playing on social media? But honestly, the way I see it is like social media and all these things, yes, like they're not real, but let's get real. Like that's where people spend so much of their time. They're at work, they're on their Instagram, they're even with friends sometimes, they're just hanging out on Instagram. Like that's where we like hang out now is the internet. So I'm just trying to learn how to like figure it out, like how it works so that I can benefit from it as much as I can, you know, like if I can figure out these skills now, I know that in 10, 15, 20 years, when social media is, who knows what platform we're going to be on, but I feel like people don't really change. As long as I can understand those mechanics, I'll be in good shape.
Now, you used another term that I would like you to share with our audience, and that is a self limiting belief. What's a
Oh.
self limiting belief?
The way I define a self-limiting belief is a belief that you hold either about yourself or about the world in general that limits you, that may or may not be true. In one of my classes at the U, they had us read some Descartes, and it was asking, or it read one of his like writings talking about how he questioned every single one of his beliefs.
Every one. Yeah.
Every single last one of them. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I've been reading a lot lately, and when I read books, I like to question what I'm hearing. I'm like, okay, do I agree with what this author is saying? How does that change what I think about myself or about whatever they're talking about? And then I started realizing, holy cow, there's a lot of beliefs that I hold about myself and about just life in general that may not be true. Like there's so many things that we believe wholeheartedly are true. But if we step back for just a minute and get to the root of where that belief came from, we might realize that a lot of the things that we believe to be true are not true, and they're actually holding us back and they're actually limiting us.
You make me think of the story of the 4 minute mile. So,
Mm.
for ages and ages, they figured the 4 minute mile couldn't be run. You know, they figured it was the physiology of the runner and this, that, and the other, because nobody could break a 4 minute mile until one day, and I forget the gentleman's name, so we'll have to Google it. A guy broke the 4 minute mile. That's not what's fascinating, though. What's fascinating is over the next 3 or 4 weeks, three or four, five other guys ran a 4 minute mile. All they needed was somebody to show it could be done, which means everybody who wasn't running a 4 minute mile was listening to their own self limiting belief that they can't do it.
That's such a good example of like self-limiting beliefs and how they can spread so far. Like the whole world believed that you could not run under a 4 minute mile. And it took one man believing in himself that he could do it. And he literally changed the sport of running forever because now it's like normal to run under a 4 minute mile if you're competing at that high of a level.
Well, then let me ask you this. So, one of the reasons I invited you is that you clearly have an understanding of of goal setting theory. You have an understanding of the processes and systems that feed into effective goal setting and accomplishing goals. What do you feel like still is an issue for you? Is there some aspect of goal setting that you're just like, I am having the toughest time nailing this down?
I think one thing that I struggle with is doing like an ARR. I don't remember exactly what that stands for. I picked it up in a book, but it's basically just like circling back on your process and reevaluating your own performance. Like, okay, what went well, what went poorly, and what can we do better for next time? What do we want to keep for next time? That's something I haven't been doing as much lately, as far as like, okay, if I failed at this new habit I'm trying to implement or whatever, let's say I didn't do it as consistently as I would have liked. Something I haven't been doing as much is like going back and being like, okay, where did it break down and what can I do to avoid that breakdown in the future? And like even just talking about it right now, I'm like, oh, maybe that's why I haven't been doing X, Y, and Z. Maybe I need to have an ARR with myself and realize, okay, why is this system breaking down and what can we do to improve it?
I really appreciate where you're coming from. I tell my students, and you'll remember this, I say, listen, school is a safe laboratory environment. You can screw up here all you want, and you're fine. It's okay because it's in our failures. Oh my gosh, the way our culture has demonized what is like the richest treasure we can find. Our failures are basically the learning process. And it's only by trying and failing and reassessing, evaluating, and then changing, the way that we approach it next time, do we actually improve. It's astonishing to me how much in our culture, including in colleges and universities, we shame failure. And that prevents us from reaching further, from trying harder, from stepping outside our comfort zone. Because when we shame failure, we tell people, stay in your comfort zone.
Mm.
Don't stretch beyond your capabilities. Don't grow your capabilities. And so, yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, because what you've essentially said is, I think I could benefit by going back and analyzing my failures and
Mhm.
seeing where I can make tweaks and improvements, and then try again and reassess and just continuously go through that cycle.
Totally. And I love that you kind of like honed in on failure a little bit, because I feel like the way that society like at large views failure is so negative. And I wish people could realize that failure is literally how you learn to succeed. Like every success is built on failure, and failure is not even a real thing. Like it's literally just feedback. It's just telling you like, nope, that's not how you do it. It's do better here or whatever.
It's
Like you
feedback.
get,
Oh, I
yeah.
I love that. Failure is feedback. That's
100,
great.
100%. It's just feedback. And like, there literally is no thing is failure. Like, you can't fail as long as you don't give up. Like, if you just keep trying and keep trying, you literally cannot fail. I will die with that on my tombstone. Like, you literally cannot fail if you don't give up.
You know what? I could totally rebrand this whole podcast around kind of re-indoctrinating society when
Ooh,
it
I like
comes to
that.
the concept of failure, because I'm a big believer in it. I'm a big believer. And
Totally.
another thing is, I'm a big believer in failing fast,
Hmm.
which is try it, do it, throw it up. And when you're posting daily, you're failing fast, right?
Yeah,
You're
very
learning
fast.
what works, what doesn't, and so forth.
And I think there's magic in failing fast, and failing fast, like not that you're trying to fail, but just being okay with whatever you do, like is not perfect. I think the magic happens when you start doing things consistently over the course of many days, weeks, and months. You start to make progress in ways that you would not make progress had you been less consistent in your approach. If you did it maybe once a week, or a couple of days yes, a couple of days no. Like the progress that you make when you're consistent and are okay with the end result of whatever you make, the progress you make is just different. Like different connections start clicking when you do things every single day and aren't afraid of the big F word.
What goal are you working on right now? If I'm interviewing you again in 5 years, where are you? What will you have accomplished by then?
So I think it's really interesting you bring that up. If you look in the corner of my screen, you'll see like a little board hanging up above my wall. You can't really see like what it says, but I'll just kind of read it out to you. The very top line says San Diego X 2025. So the mission for me is to be living in San Diego by 2025. That's just like where I want to be location wise. Below that, it has a bunch of other like big picture values that I see carrying me to become the person that is living that lifestyle. So it includes things like health, purpose, freedom, financial freedom, time freedom, and location freedom, consistent improvement in life, integrity, internet money. So like making money on the internet, adding value, presence, and it's all based on a foundation of love. So those are kind of like my guiding principles for where I want to get to in 5 years. Like when you say like big picture, yeah, if we do this podcast again in 2026, hopefully I'll be podcasting you from my beach house in San Diego.
I'll be your guest then.
Oh yeah, come through. We'll do a special guest episode at the beach house in San Diego. That would be cool.
Oh man, I would drive down for that. That would be fantastic.
Totally.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. I especially appreciate it because you're somebody who's clearly done his research, somebody who has internalized these principles into his life, and to the extent you can, you're living them. And that's really exciting to watch. So I'm going to include your Instagram and your TikTok and so forth in the description of this podcast. And everyone who's listening and watching, I really invite you to follow Andreas, because what he's doing is really, truly inspirational. And I think you'll get a lot out of it.
That means so much coming from you. Thank you. And genuinely, like Lon, thank you so much for even like reaching out to me and considering me to be on this podcast. Like that's like a really like huge compliment coming from a professional that I admire and look up to so much. So thanks for even the opportunity. And I hope that we can keep doing things in the future. And maybe I'll bring you on for my podcast when I have one in the future.
I'm going to put it on my calendar, man.
For
hey,
sure.
Thank you very much.
Of course. My pleasure.
This has been awesome. And in truth, I wish I could spend a lot more time than I'm going to summarizing everything he's gone over, because they're very powerful. Some of the things that he talked about is building a system, really challenging our self-limiting beliefs, and being consistent in accomplishing our small, seemingly insignificant tasks. But the thing that I really want to invite you to embrace the most is the idea of just practicing what we do. Here's the thing. A lot of us don't really see the value in doing something unless somebody is paying us for it, or unless we're getting some sort of external reward for it. The idea of just doing something for that something's sake and practicing it just doesn't always sit well with us. But that's exactly what it takes to be successful. He is putting money in the bank today to be successful tomorrow. Now, this is an idea that you heard from Jade in a previous podcast. Everything you do today is going to pay off tomorrow. And Andreas is an excellent example of just grinding away, even though there isn't any immediate feedback or reward for his work. But the reward is coming, I promise. All right, thank you for joining us today. If you found this helpful, please tell your friends and family and coworkers about this. They have their goals too. Give them a hand. All right? And until we talk again, have a fantastic day.